But joining us now on the program, really pleased to have my next guest, represents you listeners just north of the state line in Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, Congressman Mark Greene. Congressman, how are you this afternoon?
I am great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, well, let's get into it. The big package, the coronavirus relief package, given kind of where we are right now at this point in time, are things going as you had hoped, as you had expected?
Yeah, I think so for the most part. I mean, there's some things about this package that were very frustrating, the money to the Kennedy Center and all of, the sort of pork that was loaded into this thing. But I think overall the programs that are in progress are going well. We did have a little bit of a hiccup in terms of, folding out the small business loan thing. You're talking about $350 billion that is going to be distributed over the next few weeks. So it's to be expected that there'll be a day or so late on the application, but it's coming, and folks out there should know that they changed the form last night, the application process, and there'll be more amendments to that through the early part of next week. I anticipate, though, in talking to the banks in our district here, that things are going to go pretty smoothly. They're standing up.
Yeah, I guess there's all these hurdles and things you got to account for when anything the government does that's big like this. But this much money, never in the history of the country before. I guess. Expecting it. It seems to have won the favor of investors. So I guess that's a good sign. But do you think this is going to get us through this rough patch, or is there the possibility that we're going to take another look at something?
Well, I certainly hope that it is. But what we will undoubtedly find out is that the way the language of the bill was structured, some people got left out. That's what happens when government, and it's the reason why government shouldn't ever do this. But in this very unique circumstance, we had to keep people. I mean, we're talking about a complete stop to the entire U.S. economy, so it's unprecedented. World War II didn't have this big of an impact on the economy. So obviously, it's going to have its challenges. There are going to be people that are left out, probably small amounts, pockets here and there. And we'll have to do something to sort of address those, try to be as fair as we possibly can. Short of that, though, I certainly hope we don't need, tons more money, and that's all based on how long we stay in this full stop. Hopefully this virus gets contained, and we realize and learn some more things about the virus. Perhaps some of the therapeutics begin to really show promise, and we can get out of this thing quickly, get the economy going, and this is just a hiccup. But we don't know, and so the overall dollars that are necessary are still sort of, in a way, up in the air.
Well, for my listeners' benefits who may not be familiar with you, you're a physician, you have a medical background. You understand this better probably than the layman. Tell me this, though. Do you feel like the curve is getting lowered? First of all, I guess tell us about kind of where you are locally, but in general, do you think it's starting to have an impact, all these measures we're taking?
I think very clearly. If you look at the briefing that Dr. Birx gave, I guess it was 2 or 3 days ago, where they actually showed the curves. You could look at the curves in all of the states, but really New York. Maybe there was one other that was sort of in that exponential phase. Almost all of the curves looked like they were tracking to be pretty flat. And if we keep everybody sort of in that, then we're in a great spot relative to where we could be. And yeah, I'm an ex-Army ER physician and the CEO of a healthcare company that ran emergency departments all over the country. In fact, down in Alabama, my company, worked at Boaz and worked down in Anniston. We ran one of the ERs there in Anniston years ago. So I totally understand, what's happening at the tip of the spear, so to speak, but also at the public health side, where we have to make the drastic mitigation measures to keep this thing from being worse than it can be.
Well, I guess the fear is you may lower the curve, but does that elongate the curve? But if you lower the curve, right, does it somehow mitigate the number of cases and we get through this in generally the same time frames as if it were the other way?
Yeah, a mathematician might say that the area under the curve is the same. It's just you flatten it out. And to some extent that's true, but there's also the longer we sort of hold off on hitting peaks, the more time we have to discover the ability to either stop its spread completely or kill the virus, with a therapeutic. So a lot of research is still happening, lots to still understand, which will guide decision making. But the more we can flatten it, the better we are relative to our medical resources and the number of ventilators and things like that we have. What we don't want to do is get the curve up high enough so that the daily utilization of the ventilator capacity of the United States is exceeded, or even really regionally. That's the primary reason why we want to flatten it. But you're right. I mean, the area under the curve may potentially be the same in the long run.
Well, tell me this, obviously the American healthcare system couldn't have anticipated a pandemic of this magnitude, and we couldn't have had the ventilators and all the things you would need, the gear, et cetera. But I think coming out of this, we're really going to have to rethink the American healthcare system structurally, just how fast you could get moving in these situations. Do you get the sense that that's coming down the pike?
I do not think that we need to structurally change the healthcare system. I do think we need to have, the U.S. government have some pandemic response measures in place with perhaps larger numbers of ventilators in the strategic stockpile, larger numbers and more. We've got the PPE and all this in these strategic stockpiles. Perhaps we need to divide those and spread them out more. So there's lots of lessons to be learned. Clearly the supply chain, having China make 80% of critical medications is just foolish. And we let that slip up on us. Thank goodness the president's been pushing this issue about bringing manufacturing home. Well, if we'd only listened to him when he first got in office and moved our pharmaceutical manufacturing back to the United States, well, we wouldn't have this problem. So you're going to see, from a national security standpoint, a lot of those things addressed in the coming months. Right now, we got to get through the virus and, save as many lives as we can.
Well, let's
and the economy.
Let's talk on the China situation and decoupling from China. Do you get the sense, that there's going to be a movement afoot when you guys get back to Washington D.C.? Is that going to be on the front burner? That you're going to figure out a way to do this? Is that? I mean, there's been a little talk, but I don't really, exactly what that might entail.
Well, I'll give you an example. Right now, in the midst of this crisis, China is buying up small companies that run into cash flow problems in the United States and then can't continue doing business. So they liquidate the company or sell the company, and China is buying them, and they're buying them in things like the avionics and aviation industry. Well, we've got a bill. I've got an amendment that I'm putting together that will address that issue and try to stop China from acquiring those national security type entities. Another perspective, China is telling countries in Europe that, we'll give you masks, but you have to implement our 5G Huawei system. And that sort of bribery in the midst of a healthcare crisis really shows the true colors of who China is in this regard. But you'll absolutely see incentives to bring home the manufacturing. There probably will be increased requirements on medical facilities to maintain certain stores of, for example, protective equipment. And then, of course, the stockpiles. There will be bills that change the requirements of those stockpiles so that we're better prepared. No doubt about it.
Joined by Congressman Mark Greene of Tennessee's 7th Congressional District here on WVNN. How is your district, your locality? What are you hearing from business folks or the business community, from medical professionals, and dealing with this? It seems to me it hasn't really taken the strong arm of government to get people to kind of get in line and act in the best interest of the public. Is that your sense?
Tennesseans are just like Alabamans. We care about each other. We love our fellow man, and we want to make sure we don't do anything to hurt each other. So I think for the vast majority of us, Tennesseans are adhering to the requirements. The business people are obviously concerned about how long this stays in effect, and then what resources are available to get them through this. The elderly are obviously very concerned about transmission of the disease, and what are we doing at nursing homes? And so we're sort of a microcosm of the nation in that regard, and all of the issues that you hear on the national media are questions that folks are asking me. And I am talking with my local ER physicians. They do have the PPE that they need to do their job. There are certain things that are now, initially we were concerned about supplies and swabs and PPE, and then it flipped to ventilators. Now it's something we didn't think about, but, we have to put people, when you put a person on the ventilator, you have to paralyze them so they don't fight the ventilator and put them to sleep. Well, those medications that we use to do that when someone's on a ventilator are we're going through those supplies massively. So it's just all of these different things. And my local ER docs are like, hey, we're running out of this drug, or we're running out of that, or we're close, concerned we're going to run out of this drug. So it's just it's a constant management, like a battlefield. There's somebody that's got to be looking at every point on the battlefield and where the enemy's attacking and where the beans and the bullets have got to go. And that's essentially what's going on. We're in the middle of this, and everything happening in my district's pretty much happening all over the country, and vice versa.
Well, on the front of PPE, on the mask, on ventilators, all the things we need to combat this, the push to use the Defense Production Act by the president. Maybe that's necessary to get some bad actors in line, but it also, to me, is a conservative. I'm skeptical of government coming in and telling a private business how, or the best way to get things made that we need. Kind of talk about where you are on that, and where you think, what do you think the right approach is to getting what we need to combat coronavirus?
Look, I think the president has done an amazing job mobilizing industry all across the country, whether it's Walmart doing testing kits in their parking lot, or 3M and other companies, and Ford, GM manufacturing ventilators. I mean, he has done what's been necessary just through leadership, without having to say, he's enacted it. They've not compelled businesses in accordance with the law. And, of course, the left is like, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you? Well, you know what? I don't think he needs to. I think through his leadership and through Mike Pence's leadership, they've recruited the industry of America to jump in here and start producing. And they have. And when a capitalist, free market system starts responding, it will always outperform government. It has since the dawn of man. And so I much prefer, having that as an arrow in the quiver, so to speak, but the president has not had to fire it, because he's done such an amazing job leading the industry to deliver for the American people. And that's an even better way to do it.
We'll wrap it up on this. It seems like, all these problems, all these hurdles that have come up, and remember initially it was testing kits, and we seem to be getting our sea legs under us with that. I think it seems like we're figuring this out, how to act, and it's just going to take just a little bit of patience from everybody.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Well, here's the problem with both the media and the left, particularly this left. If you're in the middle of a crisis like this, when the enemy is overrunning your position, that's kind of where we are. We got ambushed, and you're gonna miss a couple of things. But if let's say you miss 2 questions on the test, you make a 98. But the left is going to talk about the two things you missed on the test all day long. They're going to repeat it 500 times, and they're going to convince people that it was the most horrible response on the planet. But if you look at it, really, it was a 98, an A, a good solid A. And that's the problem with the left and the media, and it's so infuriating. Fortunately, most Americans, most Tennesseans, and folks from Alabama know and understand this, and thank God we get it, because that's the heart of the problem. And they seize on that, and, you know, that's the challenge we have to overcome. We have to make friends with it, drive through it, and continue to do the best we can, and communicate where we can and where we have successes, but just know that in the midst of a fight like this, there are going to be a few things, a few balls that get dropped, and hopefully we can defend from the guys who really don't care about the end result, just want to be critical.
Yeah, I think the president's doing his best playing the hand that he's been dealt. Hey, Congressman, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for making time for us.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun.
All right. Thank you for joining us. That was Congressman Mark Greene, represents Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, just across the state line to the north. A lot of you listeners in Tennessee listen to WVNN. We appreciate that. All right, folks.